Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is my co-host, Janie Gillette, and we're back here for another episode of the podcast, and we have another game to preview in the Crown. We have some recruiting buzz to go over, and also a lot of transfer portal rumblings for Nebraska basketball, so we're going to cover all of that stuff here today. Before we get into that, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get into the comment section. Danny, how are you doing on this Wednesday morning?
I'm doing good. We got a lot of news to cover. The Crowns tonight for basketball, like you said, and never a relaxing moment when you're covering Nebraska sports. But I like it that way.
There is a lot going on, and like I've said, I've been fully invested in the crown, and Nebraska is one step closer to wearing the crown of the crown after getting a win on Monday night um, against Arizona State. And I know Arizona State had a terrible record and all that stuff, but like I've been saying, they were ranked 71st in the Ken Palm rankings, and so they weren't a terrible team, and they did jump out to an 8-10 point lead on Nebraska. Of course, Nebraska hadn't played for 3 weeks and certainly looked like it for much of the first half. But man, they sparked the defense sparked some things in the second half. I thought Cale Jacobson was spectacular. I don't know if Nebraska wins that game, honestly, without him. He forced a couple of those steals, found Juwan Gary in transition, then hit Connor Esigian for some transition threes, because that's really where Arizona State kind of struggled, was with turnovers and transition defense, and I thought that's where Nebraska turned it around. So Cale Jacobson might get some more run tonight. I mean, why not?
And he's a sophomore, right? And so he has room to grow over the next couple seasons. And we keep talking about pieces for next season. We're going to lose a lot with the departures of Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams, but now we turn to who is going to be an impact player next season. And Cale Jacobson could really find a solid role. We've talked about bench depth, right? And Cale Jacobson could be a very, very solid bench player, especially if he keeps this up. And to me, watching him on Monday night was very encouraging for the future.
Yeah, I mean, former walk-on, and maybe he could take the Sam Hoiberg route. Where
Mm-hmm.
where Sam kind of, people thought like, oh, it's just kind of nepotism. Like, no, he just kind of makes plays, and it just got to the point where like every time he was out there, he was doing something good enough to stay out there. And maybe that's what Cale Jacobson scored 2 points in that game, but he had a massive impact. I mean, I think he had like 3 steals and 5 assists. So that's not. I mean, he was bringing the ball up the court at times, and that's not something that I thought was gonna happen. I really didn't think that was in his wheelhouse. I didn't know much about him. I've hardly ever seen him play, because looking at his entire career, he averaged 2.8 minutes last season and 4.6 minutes this year. So not really playing a ton of basketball. He had 55, so like basically 120 minutes on the court, leading into Monday night's game. So kudos to him, because he really provided a spark for this team. Connor Esigian had 7 field goals. He made, I think scored 17 points in the second half. So, I mean, he was huge, and I thought he did a good job not just settling for 3-point shots. And then, of course, Bryce and Juwan Gary did what they do. So I feel good about how they performed, and I just kind of feel like, getting that first postseason win is always the toughest one to get. And, they had some struggles, but now that they've got into it, I feel like they have a much better chance to play well tonight. And one final note that's really interesting. This is from the social media account Pavelka's Fat Uncle, who I love, is kind of a fun follow if you're a Nebraska basketball fan. But he pointed out that Monday night was Nebraska's just the fifth postseason tournament win in the basically in this century, in this since the 2000s. So I mean, that's pretty crazy. You look at the best Nebraska postseason teams of all time. He had a whole list of the 1996 team, which won 5 games in the NIT, the 87 team, which won 4, and the 1983 team, which won 3. So if Nebraska wins tonight, they'll join the 04 and the 97 teams as to basically so they would be one of 6 Nebraska basketball teams that's won multiple games in the postseason. So I know people are kind of rolling their eyes at this, but I still think, based on the history of this program, it's still meaningful for Nebraska.
And like I said before, I think it's meaningful for guys to kind of carve out their roles for next season. Like if we can get the Connor Esigian that we saw on Monday night in a starting role next season, then that's definitely encouraging. And a guy like Jacobson, who makes the most of his minutes, he could see a bench role, a sizable bench role next season. And I thought Monday night, it was a really good indication of where this team, could be. And when you look at how the roster will be constructed next year, and then you have the freshmen like Nick Janowski and Braden Frazier, I think this team has the pieces to be successful. It's just going to be about putting them together.
Yeah, and looking to, we'll talk about what this team's going to look like here in a second with some transfer portal news and how that could shape the roster next season. But let's focus on Georgetown for just a second. They knocked off Washington State the other night, 85-82 in kind of a high scoring game. They're 18-15 now. And what's interesting about Georgetown is, we talked about this tournament to me reminds me of non-playoff bowl games and motivation. Well, for Georgetown, they had single-digit win seasons each of the past 3 years. So they've doubled their win total from a year ago. Ed Cooley's in his second season, so this is kind of an important tournament for them. However, at the same time, they're without two of their three top scorers, who I'm assuming just opted out. I didn't even check into it. I just know they're not playing in this tournament. But Malik Mack is playing in this tournament. He hit 8 3-pointers on Monday night. They hit 13 as a team, which is somewhat concerning to me because we all know Nebraska kind of struggles with the 3-point defense. But Georgetown this year has not been a great defensive team. They are ranked still in the top 100 in the KenPom rankings. They're I think 86th. Nebraska's in the top 50 now, which is kind of crazy, but they're actually ranked higher than teams that got at large bursts into the NCAA tournament. So that's just it is what it is. But yeah, there's quite a few teams that got at large bursts that are ranked behind Nebraska in the KenPom. So we'll see how this goes. If Nebraska wins tonight, they'll probably end up playing Boise State, who's 47th. So I mean, getting to that semifinal game should be pretty good if Nebraska can get there. Villanova, who won last night, they're 52 in the KenPom rankings, and Cincinnati's 51. I didn't check if they won. I didn't follow up on the full bracket, but I think that the Crown does have a lot of exciting teams. This Georgetown matchup, though, is one I think Nebraska should be able to take advantage of. I just don't see how they don't, win this game. I've been looking for a spread. I didn't see one. But looking at Georgetown, especially without some of their best players, they turn the ball over quite a bit. They're not a great shooting team. Even when they had all their guys, they were 292nd in the country in 3-point percentage. So, I know they had 13 the other night, but that seems more like a one-off, although quite a few teams have had one-off 3-point performances. Nebraska. So what do you think about Georgetown? I'll let you get a word in here.
I think Georgetown, he's Ed Cooley is a very solid coach. He actually coached a lot here in Massachusetts, starting at UMass Dartmouth. And, I honestly remember him as an assistant at Boston College, around the mid-2000s. And then, of course, he built the Providence basketball program from 2011 to 2023. So he had a lot of success there as well. So I have tremendous respect for Coach Cooley. And, when you look at this Georgetown team, they're scrappy and they can shoot the basketball. So there's, like you said, there's always a worry when Nebraska faces a shooting team. But I think this game could end up being really close. I think if Nebraska can get another night like they did from Asijan last night, or not even Asijan, but just get that third scoring option rolling, then I think they could be in good shape. It's about, Bryce Williams and Juan Gary have been able to take over games, but it's always been, when Nebraska's at their best, it's finding that third guy that can do the same. Like, for example, Berkey Boykatunzel against Ohio State. We talked about his, big game in that one. And, his the additional scoring really helped him, really helped Nebraska kind of get over the hump. And I think as long as Nebraska has that third scorer, they should be okay.
And so, yeah, I definitely agree. I think, Siege needs to do a good job, shooting the three and forcing turnovers. I think Nebraska's going to have a good chance to try to force some turnovers and get out in transition when they can get out and get some easy buckets in transition, especially for Juwan Gary. That seems like, a big deal for him, for his game offensively. Just hasn't been shooting the ball well lately. And I think he's just, I think he's just tired. I mean, he had those 2 threes in the second half, though, the one that didn't hit the rim and the one that barely hit the rim. And to me, it's just a sign of fatigue. And him and Bryce, I think, although they didn't play for a few weeks, so they should be a little bit better. But I think they've just played a lot of minutes this season. So yeah, what's interesting is you look at this bracket and for the Crown. So Cincinnati and Central Florida won yesterday, as well as Villanova and USC. So if you look at the Ken Palm rankings, Georgetown's actually the lowest rated team still in the tournament. So you got Boise State, who's like 47th against Butler, who's 75th. So Nebraska will play the winner of that game. If they beat Georgetown tonight. And then on the other side, you've got UCF, which is 69th. So they're pretty high up there. They're playing Cincinnati is 51. And then Villanova, which is 52 against USC, which is number 58. So, I mean, I know that this tournament feels a little like, I'm not sure the word that I was looking for, but I like it. I like this format. I like the Power
together.
Five. Yeah, thrown together. Thrown together a little bit, but I think that the way that they've organized it and run it, I like it a lot better than the NIT because I mean that happens over a 3-week period, where I feel like right now I'm focused on basketball, and this week I do want basketball, and they've got all these games, 4 games back to back of pretty quality teams. I know they're not NCAA tournament teams, but I also do feel like it's worth reminding people that there are 364 teams that play Division I college basketball. So if you're one of the 100 or so teams that are playing in the postseason, you're still in the top third of it. So I mean, there's a lot of good teams that are sitting at home right now, and I'm happy Nebraska is still playing, and it would be great, man, if they could win this game. Then they'd have to likely play Boise State, and then maybe like Cincinnati or Villanova or USC. So all I'm saying is that the road to get to this championship is going to be, if they do win it, they're going to have to beat 4 teams in a row ranked in the top 86 of the Ken Palm rankings. So that's a big achievement no matter what the tournament's called.
Yeah, for sure. And, USC gave us trouble when we played them in January. So it's not like, these are bad basketball teams. These are good teams. And I know
I'd like to pay them back for that loss too.
I mean, that when you look back on it, that loss kind of didn't change the trajectory of the season, but it was a big loss. Like when you kind of look back on things, and I know for a lot, and even for me sometimes, it's hard to feel excited about this tournament, but the quality of play for these games for all teams has honestly kind of impressed me.
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of how strong these conferences are too. That sometimes you might not have the best record, but that's because hell, man, like look at the Big Ten. Almost every team in the league is ranked in the top 100, and if you're playing a lot of top 100 teams on the road, like you're going to lose some games if you're not if you're not a top 30 team. So I like it. I think it probably has and already will surpass the NIT. I think the NIT will become the new mid-major tournament, and this will be, the high major postseason tournament, and I'm fine with that. I think it's I like it. I didn't think I would like it as much as I did, and maybe it's just because Nebraska's here that I'm more into it. But I do like all the Power Five kind of matchups though. And you look at the Ken Palm rankings, and like these are quality teams. So. And USC is trying to build something. Villanova obviously is getting a new head coach, so I mean they're just kind of here trying to play out the string. But still, they still have guys that are going to be there next year though. And Cincinnati, UCF, Boise State. I mean, when's the last time Boise State won anything in basketball? So
I can't even remember.
So there's a lot of teams that have it, and I could say the same thing about the other teams too. So and it can be a springboard. Teams that have won the NIT or whatever, they've used that as a springboard to success. So maybe Nebraska could win this tournament and try to get into the NCAA tournament next year. So on that note, let's talk about what's been happening in the transfer portal. Actually, before we do that, what's your prediction for tonight? Finally, sorry, I skipped the prediction part, but
no, you're right. I'm gonna say Nebraska 83 and then Georgetown 76. Nebraska will pull away late.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Nebraska. Let's say 82 to 74. Like Nebraska will win. I haven't seen a spread yet, but I would have to think Nebraska's going to be favored.
They're hard to find, honestly, for this tournament.
So yeah, it's interesting that in Vegas that they don't have a spread for a game that's in college basketball. Sometimes they don't come until the same day, but I would think Nebraska would be favored in this matchup, and they should, they should win this game. I mean, really, if they, I would be disappointed if they lost this game. But like I said, Georgetown, they haven't been to the postseason for a while, so they're definitely going to be hungry, and they're playing some guys that like are talented that haven't got to play as much because some of their older guys are gone. So I mean, you can look at it like it's also kind of hard to judge this Georgetown team because some of these stats that I'm reeling off like 292nd and 3-point percentage. Well, that's like different guys playing. I mean, that's that you have three guys that don't that aren't playing in this tournament that played quite a few minutes for these guys. Like Drew
Yep.
Fielder is one. We mentioned him as a potential target in the transfer portal. Micah Peavy, Jaden Epps. So it's just it's a whole different it's a whole different team. You've got guys that are like actually really strong recruits too. Is one of them. Curtis Williams is a top 100 recruit, and he got a lot of play. He was 1 for 10 from the 3-point line the other night, so hopefully he plays like that again. But it's just it's hard to judge this Georgetown team because it's a whole new team, and these guys are hungry trying to carve out their roles for next season. So
I think the same thing could be said about Nebraska. There are roles to be carved out for next season, and we were just talking about it off air. But this could be, like you just said, a good springboard for this program to see where they're at and what other areas they need to address.
And yeah, and somebody that I've been watching really close is Berkey, Boyka Tunsil. He's somebody I'm really high on his upside, going into next season. And so looking at the transfer portal now and how that could all fit together, we got a positive update from Robin Washut of Husker Online, who has predicted Bryce Stanford to commit to Nebraska. I saw some rumblings on from some other social media accounts, but nothing like reliable or verifiable. But after his visit to Illinois, he canceled the visit to Ohio State, and Robin's usually pretty reliable in his
Yeah,
predictions.
he
He
is.
said a commitment could come at any time. So, I mean, to me, this would be a massive get. Um, I'm not saying that Price Sanfort's going to change the program or anything like that. I just think if you're talking about upgrading the 3-point shooting, which is something that Fred Hoiberg really wanted to do, that's a way to do it. And um, he scored about 9 points, just under 9 points a game last year in the Big Ten. Shot 40% from three. So, thinking about that, only 2.9 rebounds per game, but he only played 22 minutes. So, he could play more minutes. Not obviously not a great defender, but it's hard to also judge some of those numbers because Iowa's just known as a terrible defensive team. So I feel like your defensive numbers are going to look bad no matter who you are playing for Iowa. If you're judging it by like just points allowed per possession type deal. So and you look at how he could fit with Rink Mast and then Berkey. If you have him as like your 3, I think which would fit in really well. Although maybe Markwell Sutton could be in that role too. He's also been a guy Nebraska's been targeting, but
He's going
yeah,
to be tough, but
yeah, I agree. But Sanford, man, and then you've got your front, if you include him in your front court with Berkey and Rink Mass, you've got 3 guys who can shoot the heck out of the ball, a true floor spacer. And the way I look at it, you've got 2 bigs who you can use in ball screen situations, who can, be pick and pop type players, who could even, kind of have that high low game. I mean, remember the high low, that like Rink used to have. Like Rink's a really good passer, and I feel like Rink and Berkey's a pretty good passer too. Honestly, he's a pretty
yeah.
skilled player. So I definitely feel like he didn't put his best foot forward this season. I feel like he still just hasn't, reached his potential. And if he could do that next year with Rink Mass, you get Price Sanford. That's a pretty good, starting point. Connor Esijan, Nick Janowski, like you said, Braden Frager, Sam Hoiberg. Still some spots open, but I think that Price Sanford would be a massive addition to kind of start off the transfer portal for Nebraska.
And I know you said he's not necessarily a program changer, but I do think he helps elevate the program a little bit. I think his addition, with his experience, his ability to shoot the basketball, I do think he could be a factor in terms of, getting over the hump to the NCAA tournament in that respect. So he would be a big pickup, and I always take these predictions with a little bit of a grain of salt, but if we were able to land Sanford, then I would feel a lot better about this roster.
Yeah, absolutely. I would too. And one of the biggest things is this team needs more 3-point shooting, and Sanford would be a huge addition for that. And like you think about, you could play with Sanford and Connor Essegian on the floor at the same time. I mean, think about that from a defensive perspective and how much spacing, that would open up in the middle of the floor. So I like that idea. Another really interesting player, Jamarcus Lawrence, the former Husker, entered the portal this week. Nebraska has reached out to him. He told Robin Washut that there's a chance he could come back to Nebraska. They have to have more conversations. I really do think, there's a lot of familiarity here. I think he left because he wanted to have a bigger role with Rhode Island, and he did. I mean, he played 28 minutes last year compared to the 23 minutes he played with Nebraska. So he did have a bit of a bigger role, but averaged 9.9 points per game. A lot of fans I've seen have like, don't bring him back, but I think this would be a great move. I think, just going to come down to like what the role would be, but whether he's your starting point guard or, a combo guard, I think he's just a really versatile piece. He could be an off guard. He could allow you to get maybe a point guard that's not, focused on being a playmaker, but more of like a scoring point guard, because Jamal Lawrence does average 2.5 assists per game. He's averaged over 2 assists each game in each season of his career. So he is a pretty decent playmaker. I would say he's a plus defender, and he shot 39% from 3. So another floor spacer and a guy who could kind of be that 3-and-D type of guy who could also be a ball handler for you.
And if I recall correctly, he was also very good at the mid-range jumper type of game, right? He was a good mid-range shooter, so good pull-up shooter. And I know some fans don't want to bring him back. I would love to bring him back. I was very sad when he left because I thought his skill set actually fit this offense pretty well. And Nebraska's been missing a ball handler at the guard position for quite some time, and I don't know if he's necessarily a true point guard, but he would be a step in the right direction there. So I wouldn't mind a reunion at all, depending on if he would accept his role, which we wouldn't necessarily know what that would be yet.
Yeah, and I think he would probably start on this team, to be honest. But
yeah, I could see that.
It depends what your point guard could be, but you could have some really interesting lineups. Now, one guy who was off the board is Jalen Jackson, the Purdue Fort Wayne point guard. I think he went to Butler. So he committed yesterday. And then Nick Graves who's somebody I really wanted from Charlotte. He's now visiting Creighton, of course. So it sounds like that's going to happen. But that's the kind of player Nebraska needs. I think like a dynamic scoring point guard. Because like that's the thing is Markwell Sutton too, the Omaha forward who was the Summit League Player of the Year. He is holding a Zoom with Nebraska, and I posted on Facebook, like, I think this would be a good replacement for Bryce Williams. And someone was like, well, he doesn't do what Bryce Williams done. It's like, well, no, I'm not talking. You're not going to find a like for like replacement for Bryce Williams. Like that's like the chances of that happening are just very rare. But I'm talking about like, how do you replace that production of a volume score? And Markwell Sutton, even though he's not a great 3-point shooter, I think could do that. Although he is kind of like a small ball 4. So, I mean, it would be interesting to see how he would fit into the lineup, especially like, I don't think you could take him and Price Sanford. Like, you probably could, but one of those guys is then probably going to have to come off the bench. And so it's just like, do they want to do that? It just seems like that'd be kind of tough. That just would be kind of a tough sell, I think. And with Berkey, that just seems like a lot of guys.
And Rick Mass, honestly, too.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it'd be great for Nebraska, like if somebody wanted to do that, but just seems kind of unlikely. But I could be wrong. And then you look at the backcourt. I feel like there's a lot of Connor Essegian, I think, is going to be a guy there. Then you have obviously Sam Hoiberg, Janowski, and then you try to get that point guard. So hopefully you can find kind of that scoring one. But if you add a Nick Graves, like that's somebody, a dynamic scoring guard that could have helped replace some of the production from Bryce Williams. So that's what I'm looking at. Like, get a guard like Jamarcus Lawrence. And then you don't have to find a point guard. You don't have to focus so much on finding a playmaking point guard. Like, go find a point guard who can fill it up. That's what I think would be helpful for Nebraska.
Yeah, no, I would love to have Lawrence back. I think he has all those skills to fit again, in this Fred Hoiberg offense. Because I always thought he was a good fit for this offense, and his game is a little bit different than just your standard shooter. He's more of a playmaker. Drive to the rim, attack the basket. But I thought he fit this offense well. So I wouldn't mind seeing a reunion there, and fingers crossed.
Yeah, and he's for his career, he shot 47% from on 2-point attempts. So, like you said, he's an effective scorer on more than one level. So, yeah, keep the eyes out there. Maybe we'll have a commitment from Price Sanford even before tonight's game. But if Nebraska was able to get Price and Jamarcus Lawrence, I think that would be a really good start to their transfer portal. I get what they're trying to do in the transfer portal. That would be a great start. So, with that in mind, let's go to the final segment today and some Nebraska football recruiting nuggets. Not a ton of stuff to talk about on the field. We had press conferences yesterday. John Butler met with the media, some players. Not a ton of stuff though that haven't really already covered. So we're going to focus a little more on recruiting. And the quarterback position. Trey Taylor was just in for a 2-day visit last week. There was a lot of positive buzz. We were both kind of feeling good about Trey Taylor. And then Nebraska offered Keegan Croucher on Saturday. We talked about this a little bit on Monday, but what do you think, Danny, that means about where Nebraska stands with Trey Taylor at this moment?
I think there are other teams that are making a push for Taylor, bigger programs, and I felt good about Trey Taylor. I know you felt good about Trey Taylor. I think Keegan Croucher means that Taylor may not be as much of a lock as we think. Because these days, you don't really take 2 quarterbacks in a class. That's ideal in terms of roster building, but with the NIL era now, you don't really do that anymore. So, I think other teams are going to make a push for Trey Taylor, like a Michigan or someone like that. And you probably know a little bit better than me, but I had heard that other teams were making a push for him. And so I feel like Keegan Croucher's offers and recruitment should definitely get paid a little bit more attention now.
Yeah, I know Michigan's definitely right there in the recruitment for Trey Taylor. I don't have any intel that says they're leading, but I do think it was interesting that just the way the whole thing kind of timeline with Trey Taylor and the Keegan Croucher offer, because you had Keith Williams, the Nebraska director, player of personnel, who posted a GIF of Dylan Raiola. Now, this was the same day that Trey Taylor's visit ended. Okay, so, and Keith Williams, for context, he does tease a lot of commitments. Like, he will usually post something when there's a commitment. So, and the fact that he tweeted Dylan Raiola obviously is a sign that it's Trey Taylor. Like, it's not, this isn't some deep detective dive here. And so that made me think, like, are they feeling good about Trey Taylor? Did they somehow get a silent commitment from Trey Taylor? Like, I was really kind of pondering that. And then they come out a little bit later and offer Keegan Croucher, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to get Trey Taylor. But if you have a silent commitment, if Trey Taylor's like, hey, I'm coming here to Nebraska, blah, 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 you wouldn't turn around and offer another quarterback in the same class a few hours later. That wouldn't make sense. And it also doesn't really jive with, he posted that message, Trey Taylor, like, hey, follow Nebraska football to watch my decision. So, he definitely it definitely felt like he hadn't made a commitment yet. And I think the Keegan Croucher, it's just kind of to have, more eggs in your basket. And maybe it's a ploy too, to say, hey, Trey, like, if you're not going to commit, like, we'll find another quarterback. They've done that before. Kind of putting pressure on kids, and it's not the worst thing. But also Keegan Croucher has a little bit of a different timeline. He wants to decide, I think, more in the fall after his season. So there was talk of him visiting like for a fall game. So I think it gives Nebraska the time to play out this recruitment with Trey Taylor. And then if it doesn't work, they can, take their shot with Keegan Croucher. And that's another thing too, is like, you look at Keegan Croucher, who's another team that's one of the leaders for him? Michigan. So if Michigan gets Trey Taylor, then boom, Keegan Croucher could be wide open for Nebraska.
They're playing this quarterback situation very well. I know that you and I have talked about this in previous years. They were a little bit behind on the quarterback recruiting. But now, this kind of reminds me of the Dylan Raiola, Daniel Kalen situation back in 2023, where, they let Kalen know that they were going to, try for Dylan Raiola. They still had Daniel Kalen committed at the time. And so it's about making sure that you're not completely losing out on any quarterbacks whatsoever, and making sure you don't have all your eggs in one basket. So, I really like both Croucher and Taylor. Croucher played at Cheshire Academy in Connecticut. He transferred over there a couple of years ago. So that's a really good football school, known for developing, solid college quarterbacks. So I like that Nebraska's kind of putting the feelers out for multiple quarterbacks, and that they're not necessarily behind in the cycle.
And on that note, they just hosted a 2028 quarterback, Oscar Sloan. So he's one of the top risers there. So that's a good thing for them to get in on that class. Some other recruiting news: Titan Davis, the defensive lineman. We've talked about him before, but an absolute beast out of St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah.
6'5", 238 pounds, edge. He's ninth. He's the ninth ranked defensive lineman in the entire class, according to 24/7, the composite rankings, and he's the 92nd ranked player overall. So Michigan and Alabama are the two other teams to get official visits, but Nebraska's done a lot of recruiting very well in the state of Missouri and the St. Louis area. So I think they have a legitimate chance to get Titan Davis. And you look at
He's a beast.
yeah, and some of the other official visits that have been scheduled, Jace Reynolds, Isaac Jensen, who just visited Florida State, the in-state tight end, Deacon Schmidt, DeSeven Walker, the running back, and Camden Jensen. So Nebraska's got all those official visits set up. June's starting to set up pretty well for Nebraska football on the recruiting side of things.
Battling another tight end for Florida State, or Florida State for another tight end.
Yeah.
It seems like Groundhog Day, but no, Nebraska's done a good job of setting up visits, and they've done a good job of making sure they offer these kids early. I would rather offer a kid early and have him go somewhere else because his profile is too high than to be completely late on the kid and miss out on what could have been. I mean, I think we might fall into that situation with CJ Bronaugh. He's still committed to Nebraska, obviously, but there's been a lot of traction in his recruitment from some top teams over the past couple weeks, and we've seen his recruiting rankings really rise. And I know a lot of people don't take stock into those, but it's certainly worth mentioning. And so yeah, I'll be interested, just to kind of pivot here, how Bronaugh's commitment will continue to kind of develop.
Yeah, every time he goes to a camp, man, he like runs a 4.39 or something and just looks even more impressive. So he did visit a few schools recently. Unofficially, he took visits to Florida State, to Florida, to North Carolina. He's also gotten offered recently by like Penn State and Oregon. So here he's got an official visit set for Nebraska on June 6th, but he's also officially visiting Florida. He's from Windermere, Florida. So, I mean, just to throw that out there, he's also visiting Florida State and he's visiting Penn State. So it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be a tough one to keep. He's the 7th ranked or the 8th ranked player in the state of Florida right now, according to 24/7 Sports. So usually the best players in Florida go to one of those Florida schools, not all the time, but I mean, usually when it's like a top 10 kid, it's hard to get him away, but we'll see. I mean, Miami's been trying to work its way into the mix as well. So, but the feather in the cap for Nebraska, they do have Philip Simpson, and he's been, he's been stellar. They got Ja'Cory Barney, Amari Sanders. They got a bunch of dudes from Florida. So, I'm not overly concerned, but I'm not like confident that he's going to stick it out either. Nebraska's going to have to, win this recruitment again. Like that's just the bottom line. They have to keep winning this recruitment multiple times until signing day, because even if he doesn't flip this summer, someone's going to try to flip him again in December. So like they're just going to have to defend this commitment all the way up till signing day. That's just the reality.
And I feel like you have to do that for pretty much all your commitments now in the transfer portal era and the NIL era. So I mean, I don't think it's anything new to this staff. And CJ Bronaugh is no longer the secret he was when he committed to Nebraska. That's for sure. I was shocked that he was rated as low as he was when he committed to Nebraska, and now I think the rankings are starting to see that he's a damn good football player.
Yeah, I mean, we're not always right, but sometimes we're right. We were right about that one.
So, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah. Well, just I mean, when you look at it, I just was like, he had 6 interceptions in 7 games, and he runs 10-3. It's like, what am I missing here? Why?
Yeah, his speed. I was like, is there off the field troubles? Like, what is there injury issues? Like, what is going on?
I'm like, is he playing in the worst like high school league in Florida history? Like, what's going on here? So it's funny.
I know that's the other thing too. A Florida kid like being rated that low, running that fast, like,
Yeah. So, at any rate, guys, well, that's all the recruiting nuggets that we have this week. Hopefully, we will be one step closer to the crown tonight, to taking the crown. I just love the crown jokes. I'm sorry, I know they're corny, but I love it. So, whatever. I'm here for the crown. Let's get it, man. So thanks for hanging out with us. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.